Remember when we used to talk about the paperless office,
e-commerce,
signing a contract on paper,
and even giving out an agent's pager number?
We're in a mobile world.
We're in a mobile world, and your business needs to be too.
It's a digital world.
Workflow is changing, and so too are our experiences.
There are over 350 PropTech players right now
competing for the space.
How do you keep up with it all? And what's next?
Welcome to Founders,
a new podcast with Josh Phegan
on the future of workflow in real estate.
The skill of any great real estate agent is to make sure that you find that incredible audience that you can go and sell all of your properties to. The ability to be able to build a platform, a conversation with future sellers and future buyers, to be able to establish a brand, to be able to generate more leads, and to be in a position that naturally you are really in the market. As the marketplaces become more digital, the skill of any great agent is to learn how to separate and differentiate, and to also understand the power of what's actually happening in the technology world, how things are shifting, what you can do different in terms of workflow, to be able to get not only efficiencies, but also to understand all the different things that you can do as a part of an integrated campaign. From crazy things like what we might go to call bumps to social to what we're doing and how we go to position our product in terms of depth, it's really important that you understand all the modern terms, but most importantly that you're doing the right thing by your vendor to get them in front of the most buyers at exactly the right time to maximize the sale price. Well, today we're joined by Belinda and Angus from Domain. I love to have you in the studio. We're going to have a bit of a conversation on what it takes to be phenomenal in this space. Angus, we're going to kick off a little bit with you about, driving efficiency and solutions inside of a modern estate agency practice. What are some of your thoughts? We've gone through this tech revolution where there was an app for that, and it kind of felt like there was an explosion of apps that were available. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see agencies, as markets start to tighten, really thinking what are absolutely essential apps and what are the things that they need to do to be able to make sure their workflows are more efficient as new technologies emerge. Angus, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Josh, and thanks for having us. I guess to kick it off, what's Domain really focusing around is creating competition between buyers, obviously, as we help to market properties. The second one is creating competition between portals in that space. And the third one, to your point and your question, is creating competition for other PropTechs. So what we've seen over the last 4 years is an increase in the number of PropTech companies in Australia. It's actually at about 400 now. Number keeps going up.
Yeah.
And what that means is that there's a bunch of businesses out there who aren't actually businesses. They're either products or they're features. They shouldn't be a standalone business. So at Domain, we're in a really fortunate position where we have about 50% of all transactions at least using one of our products from start to finish to that workflow. So what I'm talking about there is at the point of appraisal, we're there. We're helping you to find the right property insights via Price Finder. We're helping you to put a proposal together to pitch that to a potential vendor through Engage, making it official through RTA, launching that campaign and booking all your advertising through Real Hub and through all the way through to settlement. And so what that allows us to do is our proof point and what we want to stand for is to be an open and connected ecosystem inside of real estate and to really play that role as being the expert both in marketing but also in workflow. So what we aim to do is find those right businesses that are out there in the marketplace that deserve to be features or maybe some product that exists within ours. We don't necessarily need to buy that business. We can just partner with them or to see if we can actually build it ourselves, depending on what scale, depending on what kind of problem we're trying to solve for our mutual client. And inevitably, what do we want to try and do? We want to help our clients to try and be even faster at the rate at which they transact so they can get out in front of the customer instead of sitting behind a computer.
A lot of this is about making things easier, making things more compliant, automating, archaic processes that can be done really well, and also to understanding the risk side of a business so that we can actually manage those risks in a really powerful way. And that's like the basics of, how do you sign an agency agreement? What do we do when it actually comes to exchanging a contract of sale? What about the conversations on the inside of all of that, of putting together the marketing and making sure that happens? Where does that land in terms of all the different environments and what we're doing in the digital world, from emails that go out to what we do on portal to then what we're actually doing in terms of the socials? It's all got really confusing because there's so many options that are available and there's claims and counterclaims about what actually happens. What we have noticed though is that literally best on ground agencies are saying, okay, great, well, I need to reanalyze what is the best in breed right now that does this particular component of that workflow. And is there better integration between the apps and the technology to make that faster, smarter, and easier? So, okay, great. So I come into your business and I say, how do I sign an agency agreement here? Now, there might be some people that are like, oh, I've got this, PDF signing technology. And other people say, oh, I've got this built into my workflow. And even though they might digitally sign it via some sort of PDF signing technology, they miss out on the whole conversation around compliance. and about making sure that the right things are there and there's actually extra workflow that's got to go on. So Angus, how important is it for someone to like really get to understanding what really is this software actually solving in terms of the problem that we're trying to solve? And what are the other things that it can do that can alleviate additional pain points, wasted energy, wasted resources of what's actually happening inside the organization?
Yeah, so you look at things like fair trading coming into an office and they're going through every single authority. I remember when I was a real estate agent, you'd have to empty out the filing cabinet, give it to them all, and they'd sit there and go through it. You can now just give that to them through Real-Time Agent as an example, where they can instantly have it. They don't actually have to come into the office. It can be done remotely. Some of the things that you see really commonly, and it's still happening today, which is a little bit scary, is simple things that people end up paying fines on. Things like calculating GST, things like making sure that the range is 10% and not 15%. These are small things that trip you up that can actually cost you tens of thousands of dollars of what we've seen. The inverse of that is you're sitting in a living room and you've got a proposal that you pull together with your vendor, and this happens all the time. Agent has grabbed a marketing campaign that's a piece of paper. Some rate has gone up. What happens is they've now committed with the vendor that's $2,000 less than what the actual marketing dollars is today. So things like RealHub allow us to integrate into the RTA experience, so the authority, and allows us to sign digitally in that living room to make sure it's compliant, to make sure everything is calculated correctly, and more importantly, to make sure that all the marketing dollars are up to date and instantly getting not written back to the office and then notified the moment that authority gets signed, that we're instantly notifying all of your third-party suppliers so we can speed up the rate of actually getting that listing live as well.
It's a bit like thinking about this in like an app store. Like, what's the best in terms of my ability to be able to sign agency agreements? What's my best in terms of contract exchanges? What's my best in terms of producing the marketing around a property? What are the best things I can do in terms of getting access to property and data? What's my best experience for checking someone in to an open for inspection? And how does that then handle the SMSs and the flows that actually happen directly after that, so I know exactly what I'm doing? Angus, like in your experience, how often should an agency principal review their existing tech stack to be able to make better decisions around what they're using and potentially, maybe sunset some technology and sunrise on other tech that's actually better, faster, easier in terms of the workflow?
A common term that we've heard in the real estate industry over the last few years is change fatigue. There's actually, because of the rate of the number of prop techs being 400 out there, we've seen offices might be doing 50 listings a year, spending $250,000 in direct hard costs into their business. Now, they're not getting the ROI on those particular pieces of prop tech. So I would say it's an always-on thing. You've got to be always questioning, is this a problem that is actually solving a problem legitimately for my business, or is it helping me to scale my business to get to that next iteration or where I want to get to? But that should ultimately tie back to some kind of 12-month plan that you're doing and a 12-month review of what's worked over the last 12 months, what hasn't. Unfortunately, you've got to make some hard decisions around what might not be working. But where we're trying to position ourselves at Domain is we understand it's a really complex world. We're in a fortunate position where we've got 100 people out on the road talking to customers every single day. We've got a strategy team that we can lean on, a product team that we can lean on, so that we're not sitting alone and trying to figure this out on our own. We're trying to do it in partnership with the industry, but also leveraging the expertise that we've got and we're fortunate to be able to employ inside the Domain business so that we get the benefit of it, but also our customers see that benefit as well, of making sure that we spend our time, effort, energy, dollars, etc., on making sure that we're investing in the right areas to help our agents scale and succeed their business.
Angus, how much is it about understanding the difference of don't think about it as a supply, but think about it as a true partnership? Because I will look at it as a trainer, I can just go in and just train and I can just be a supplier and that's it. Or I can go in as a partner. And as a partner, I understand the values of the organisation, understand the key people in the organisation, the future talent that you're growing, the expectations around what you want to do in marketplace, how you want to see that, and help to formulate, a strategic plan about, best in fit in terms of what have we got available, what have we got coming off the shelf, what are the things that you really need inside of that business. And what I've tended to see is a lot of agencies have probably seen it, well, there's a supplier, as opposed to how do I build a partnership? Is there any benefit to really partnering and actually having proper conversations, with your Domain rep and really being in a position that it's not just a rep, but someone who's actually involved in helping your business to improve in its efficiency and productivity around tech?
100%. Belle and I are in a fortunate position where we get to hang out with one of the other prop tech leaders around the country, either be it at events or just having dinner with some of them as well. If you change the mindset as a real estate agency from this is another supplier that I have to deal with because it's a necessity for my business to this is a partnership, in amongst a bunch of other partnerships I've got. The nature of where we sit is we see all the good, bad and in between of all the real estate businesses of who runs a great business. What are some of the elements of success that continue to range through a range of different businesses from small, medium, large? We also get to go on that journey with them of them building their business and get them to see their success all the way through. And what that allows us to do is have a unique position in market to be able to provide you with some knowledge to help you get to the answer that you're trying to get to faster or to help you grow your business.
And this is a really important conversation because, Belinda, one of the great conversations is about positioning with property. And I wrote an article on this recently about like addictive content. And I find it like what's really addictive for people. They love the concept of off-market or early access. They love the concept of new listings. They love the concept of sold prices. Yeah. And like literally, let property be the hero. And one of my clients in Newtown said to me recently, he goes, Josh, when I got out of the videos, we actually increased the views by 85%. And I was like, wow, did you not look good on camera? He's like, no, turns out they just want to look at the property and they don't necessarily want to look at me as an agent. So how you position a property is really interesting. And I think about this that, it comes back down to the mechanisms of how you get a better fee in the lounge room, how you can make sure that you're getting better marketing in the lounge room, because this is really a positioning statement about where you want to be as a brand. Now, whether or not you are, a really high-end expensive brand like a Louis Vuitton or maybe you're the reject shop. Louis Vuitton, I assume, they go down to the detail of like what is the unboxing experience. And someone was talking to me the other day about Apple Air. I was like, what's that? And they're like, when you open the Apple product, you feel the air gliding as you go to lift it and then you see the new laptop. So they've actually really thought about the opening experience. And so what I'm saying to agents is that how you position and market property really matters, because you've got to be in a position that you think about, where are we going to be placed? How do I get in front of the right audience? Am I going to be at the top of those search results? How big am I going to look at the top of those search results? Can I scroll through imagery? And then now in what we go to call, and you're going to talk us through some of the really important things about what we go to call integrated campaigns. And there's now stages to the campaign. So Belinda, talk to us a little bit about that, like positioning with property. How important is it that agents use this as their leading mantle to be able to set a brand experience around what they do in marketplace?
Thanks, Josh. Good question. I think what really connects for me and what Gus was just talking about then is that option, an opportunity to really build these relationships where a business owner or agency will open up where their plans are for what next. Because there's two things we can help you with. We can help you with the right now and what's the best brand, profile, marketing campaign for where your business sits right now. Obviously helping you to sell for more, sell faster, but also understanding for some of your agents, they're trying to move into a different bracket. They're trying to move from, the apartments into the housing market, or a business is really trying to enter the premium space. And there's a whole lot of things you can really do to customize and move the position of your marketing and your branding and profile to get ready for that next phase of what your business looks like. So I think that's first one, step one is understanding where do you want to be, not just where your business is now.
Yeah.
And then if you're looking at for campaign specific, I just see all too often we have package A and that's just what we roll out to all our customers and forget the uniqueness of property that we're actually selling, and knowing that a different buyer, you're going to have a different marketing suite appeal to a different buyer suite. And so that's a big call out that we see some of the best agents when they look at the listing or go out to an appraisal, they actually spend, a little bit of time looking at, what's the demographic I'm focusing on for the buyer for this market, where are inquiries coming from? And that's something, Domain can help you with those insights to really understand the market that you're going after, and then customize a marketing campaign that makes sense for that property rather than just the AB package all the time.
So what I often see is that sometimes as an agent, they get a bit nervous. You have them on a listing for a little bit. They've gone up against a competitor. There's apparently a cheaper fee and a cheaper marketing program. And all of a sudden they start cutting things from marketing. So we're not going to have this and we're not going to have that. Down to the detail of maybe they're not on a certain portal, or maybe they're not going to have video, or maybe they're not going to get a copywriter. I had a copywriter reach out to me last week and say, everyone's using AI for copy. I've lost my job. And I responded back, well, I don't think that's the case. I don't know who you are because you don't have a name on your Instagram profile, and I don't know what you actually do. So I've got a copywriting issue about my own copywriting business. And I'm like, yeah, you do. So it's about positioning around market and what you got to think about. If you have a look at it, this is a big difference now for agents to really understand the power of in a market that's challenged. And I was having a read about it the other day. It's we have gone from the cheapest interest rates in recorded history to the most expensive interest rates in the last 14 years. On average, most mortgages have gone up circa around 70%. And so if you look at that, where are all these buyers going to come from? So this is a buyer pool that is shrinking, and you've got to make sure that you're in front of the right buyers. This is no more do the first open 20 buyers turn up, we'll sell it on Friday. This is like you're going to have to work really hard with the quality of those buyers. And, there's a lot of people who are, proclaiming that tech in isolation will do the heavy lifting. And I'm like, well, tech combined with relationship always wins, because if I know that this particular buyer's been looking for a while, that they sold last weekend, that they need to buy, that this is the street where their mother-in-law lives, like I will get a better sale price for that house. Now I need to put other buyers around them. And, there was the old Domain statistic that I've always used for a long time, that 68% of consumers buy within a 5-kilometre radius of where they currently live today. Okay, great. Well, then let's not miss out on the local, but how are we planning on attracting that? And so I say when I'm selling marketing, hey, let me just say this to you. Look, our job role is that how are we going to bring all the locals, but how are we going to bring all those buyers from those other markets? And that's really what we've got to do, is that we've got to start thinking about where people search and how they search, and to make sure that no matter where they search, they're going to find us. Now, this leads us to what I go to call the integrated campaign. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about, what's actually happening in that space now? Because, a lot of agents are kind of like, well, I just uploaded and then an inquiry happens. But it turns out there's a lot more to what an integrated campaign can be in this environment.
Founders is brought to you by Josh Phegan Digital. When we were setting out to go and create Josh Phegan Digital, we just had this whole idea that we wanted training to be on demand. And everything in our life is on demand. We just press play inside of the Netflix app. We press play on YouTube, play on Spotify. Why couldn't we just press play on training? And what we decided is we want to be super relevant to real estate agents, so that in under a couple of minutes each day, if you wanted to, you could upskill and you could grow in new ways. And so we decided that we were going to release this thing that we called The Edit, which is basically the latest in property news stories that's happening every week right the way around the country. So you could be incredibly sharp in your conversations with sellers. And then we built out the short courses, which was all about rapidly building skills, whether or not it's about learning how to get better fees or to put on an assistant. And then we actually wanted to give you access to blueprints, so you didn't have to wait for it every year. You could just watch it whenever you wanted and actually go from zero to hero around everything that it takes, from goal setting, self and energy management, what you're doing around prospecting, listing, negotiation, and actually just have a system for the way that you work. Together with, getting really inspired by some of the best people in the industry with the black and white interviews. Josh Phegan Digital is available on iOS and also on Android. It's an incredible app, and it gives you everything that you'll need to be a much better agent. It's time to switch on.
Yeah, I think the opportunity now is our products have got a lot more complex, but they're also reaching a lot more targeted audiences at different points in time. And so a marketing campaign now starts before the listing is even loaded onto a portal or on an agency website. And so that pre-market opportunity is something that I still see so many agencies take for granted and not utilise that time, when you may be even still prepping a property, but you could be engaging with buyers and both understanding interest around price point to make sure you launch with the most relevant and effective price, but also get a head start so you can reduce down the time of your campaign by having early interest. And then I think really understanding your market to know that we'll all agree putting your listing, at the highest tier on Platinum Edge, on Domain is going to draw the largest audience and be at the top of the search results. But knowing when to, bump up the property if you're not seeing the engagement hitting with the right level of interest, knowing when that social media campaign should be sent out to really expand that interest, or to make sure those that had looked at your listing come back again to see it again and again. Because you don't just want a big one-hit wonder at the first week with a large open home and then the inquiry dwindles away. You want to keep that engagement through the whole 21-day cycle or 28-day cycle to auction, because we know every time if they see it somewhere else, whether it's social media, whether it's in print, whether it's in editorial, bringing that extra buyer to create competition is where we're seeing people create suburb records. And we talked about how do you, have a marketing campaign that's reflective of your brand. And I just worry that so many agents are short-sighted in terms of thinking, I'm going to knock down my marketing campaign so I can just win this listing, and not really thinking about the long game on how they're going to get the best price, how they're going to sell faster and then win the next listing.
And I think this is a really important part, because I didn't know what bump was. I missed that somehow. And I was like, is that like poke on Facebook? Like that was the thing back in the day. And what it was about saying, okay, you can bump it back up in the search results. So at very strategic times, like if you're about to get an offer or you've just had a price reduction, like you could bump it. I was like, oh yeah, okay, great. And then like literally, we're about to sell, we can bump it. Okay, then outside of that, you've got email blasts. So you got, okay, great, this one happens in a certain timeline. This one can happen later on during the course of that campaign. And then you're now starting to think about, well, we can actually work both ends of the campaign. So as a property is being launched, and certainly when a property has been sold, advising people about sold results is a really big part of actually building social proof in audience. And it's like, well, if you're not necessarily in the letterbox, then how do we make sure that you are in the digital world that like people are actually seeing that social proof and success? And this is the thing that I always say, okay, great. If you have a look at all of the available tools that come to you in an integrated campaign, how many of those are you actually using? And at what stages of the campaign? So are they very deliberately driven at certain points in the campaign, like early access, or are they in a position that they're done when something happens? So if there's a price reduction or an offer, we're going to bump it and send out that email alert because we want to try to like get that campaign re-energized. And, you know, like we've all seen that house or that car that's been on the internet forever, but what are we actually doing when there is a change to get that in front of the right audience? How many agents do you think would like have a list of all the available tools and have then audited on this property before we mark it sold? Did we actually get to use all those tools on the way through?
I think a high majority are not utilising the options available. And so that's a big opportunity. And I know different agencies will have different levels of support in terms of if they've got PAs or marketing or admin support staff. But I would absolutely make sure, you know, even if it's once a year, once every 6 months, to map out what's available and what's actually included in my campaign or bundle or that I've already signed up for, and making sure I'm getting the most out of it. Because we talked about that with workflow efficiencies, and are we buying extra features that may already be incorporated into a holistic product that I already run? Similar with marketing, I look at people spending a whole lot of extra money on social media, where with the domain depth listings now, you get a component of social media included. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't extend more and spend more for a wider reach, but make sure you're aware of what's included to start with as well. And so I would, you know, highly recommend people sit down and map out what's part of my offering, when do I use it and when and why, and make sure they're getting the most on what they're paying for. And
then there's that whole conversation around, you know, what are extras? So that whole part might be, if it's a really exclusive listing, it might be something like Dream Homes. Even it might not have to be exclusive, but it might be unique in some sort of a way. And that might be about some editorial component. Talk to us about like, you know, thinking differently with those unique audiences of where like print and social and portal might actually bring in a different buyer set at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly we always talk about premium properties needing to think different about how we campaign and market those. And absolutely we do. And the sort of options that you mentioned, like our Dream Homes that sits on the Sydney Morning Herald or the Age and the Domain homepage, is really driving into that passive audience and that really high affluent and cashed up buyer that you can bring into the buyer suite. But also looking at editorial, people often approach us editorial for premium properties, and what we've seen is actually unique properties can get just as much interest. And sometimes the good story, whether it's a great vendor story, whether it's that quirky house that has a weird little tree cubby house in the background, how are you really leaning in on the story of the property? How are you then exposing that to making sure you draw the widest audience and really attract that emotional connection to the property through different platforms?
So if you have a look at that, like Angus, in your perspective, like having a look at like the evolution of campaigns, print, social, portal, like agents have got to think differently about where they're positioning and why they're positioning and how that relates to their brand, right?
So I think one of the things we've done this year is spend a lot of time understanding our unique audiences as well, and almost creating like a competition creator like calculator, so that you can take Platinum Edge, but can you also do things like print? So Belle was talking before about the passive audience or the passive buyer. I mean, Josh, you would have heard many stories of the buyer who they didn't really know, who rocked up and had the money to buy and decided to buy on that day. That's not unique. It happens all the time. I hear those stories. The people who are looking in print, who are looking at the AFR, looking at all these different assets that Domain has access to, how are you making sure that you're tailoring it, depending on what property type it is, of course, as well. And then the other side around evolution is we've seen that there is over $100 million being spent on social media a year. The majority of it is still done via mums and dads and other people that don't necessarily know what they're doing around social media. They know how to upload it, but are they making sure that they're getting an ROI for your end customer, being the vendor, for that schedule that you've just loaded, that marketing campaign? And so what Domain tries to do is leverage our first-party data for lookalike audiences that should match against the property based on behaviours to make sure that we're retargeting back to those right audiences. So the money that you're putting behind it, we're making sure that we're reaching out to those right audiences, whether it's a passive audience or that engaged audience as well.
So break it down for me. What is first-party data?
First-party data is being able to identify someone's email or where they live or their property address or whatever it might be.
And then a lookalike audience?
Lookalike audience is around behaviours that they've had. So they might have interacted with a particular property. They've now left the site. They're on Facebook, but we know that they've interacted with that particular property. How do we bring them back to the site?
And that's an interesting part because like once we get them back and they watch the video and they forward the link to a friend and they're in a position, they look at the photos and they download one for their screensaver on their phone. Like that's the beginning of a dream. And actually really understanding some of those will be very active buyers and some of those will be the people that will find the buyer for you. So you got to start thinking very differently on that. And, you know, Belinda, this leads you into understanding that now there's like much more powerful insights that you can tap into. Can you talk us a little bit about, from an agent, like what do you look at? Is it market intel, competitor intel? Is there something about buyer trends? Like what's happening in that space?
I think the opportunity here is there's so much data and insights, and so it's trying to work out how you're creating your unique proposition that you're going to go into that appraisal and tell the vendor something different, that you've educated yourself about their property and spent some time, really gaining some insights to help bring a unique proposition to that sale. And so I use some examples that some of our best agents lean on Domain. We have an unbelievable set of data, one of the biggest data houses in the country, and can both bring on both Domain's data set and Nine's, which is pretty powerful, and look at things like choose a property. So I'm looking at a unit in Double Bay. Where are the inquiries coming from over the last 6 months for a property that's worth $1.5 million in Double Bay? And we can show you that maybe 50% are coming from the eastern suburbs, but another 35% are coming from the lower North Shore. Another 15% are coming from the northern beaches, and really help you dial into focus on where you might want to focus on a print publication and draw in that audience, where you might want to look at spending additional on social media, and also trying to appeal even to things like what are the top search words that are coming up. So people may be looking for pool or balconies or views, and if you've got any of those as part of your property, how do you make sure you're putting them to the top of your copy or featuring them in the headline to really gain that interest and, again, have more seekers find that property? So,
you know, I saw some data recently that 25% of all transactions in Australia last year, no mortgage. And I was like, wow. Like, that's baby boomers, right? It was my guess.
Yep.
But the interesting conversation is that, like, if 1 in 4 transactions are baby boomers, then how do I make sure that in my copy that I've got more baby boomer friendly type things? That might be, for example, single level. It might be lock and leave. It might be like easy care. Like whatever those words might be that this will tell me in terms of the insights. Hey, there's more consumers that are looking at that. And my dad said to me, you know, Josh, I'm clearly a part of the getting closer to the sunset than the sunrise club. But I've got a lot of money and not much time. I want to go and search for that. So can I actually search for that? And that's actually really the thing about like keywords and bringing those right things up at exactly the right time. You know, Angus, if there was one thing that you would say to an agent, an agency principal or a brand that they should really consider in putting their strategy together of how they're going to engage and partner with Domain over the course of the next 12 months, what would be the sort of questions that you would ask them to get them to start thinking about how they can improve that relationship, but most importantly, get better results for vendors and better results in market?
Just before I answer, I've got a curious question for you as well, Josh, around so you now go to the UK, you go to Dubai, you got all these other markets that aren't Australia, and Belle and I are fortunate as well to speak to some of these companies or portals that are doing it overseas as well. And one of the things we've noticed is that vendor-paid advertising doesn't really exist in some of these countries as well.
There's no doubt that literally Australia and New Zealand are the best at debundling. So the difference between an agency fee and marketing, and it's a little bit like if you go to some of the cheaper airlines, you can get a seat and then you go to Bali for $50, but you want to bring your bag, that's $600. So like they were able to really do that well. And I think like understanding the difference between those two things is a really critical component about like getting debundling right.
Yeah, and I think to that point, what we see or have recognised is agents in this country are in a really unique position where the vendor actually pays to advertise them. And my second question around that and the observation is, some of the best agents in the country, how do you see them positioning themselves from a marketing and commission perspective where they talk about value rather than price? And how are you seeing those traits play through in their kind of evolution of their own career as well?
Well, they tell a great story. And that's what storytelling is always about, is about allowing people to connect. So whether or not that's through a case study or we brought this buyer from this particular location, this is how it actually happened. And what you've got to do is you've got to start with belief. Like, do you actually believe in what it is that you're selling? Because if you don't believe it, you won't do it. And it's like a classic, I had an investment property and they were like, and I couldn't lease it with the other agency. So I went to another one and they were leasing it and they said, can we get a sign? I'm like, I don't need a sign on this thing. And they're like, let us put a sign up. Within an hour of the sign going up, the lady from across the road said, that'd be perfect for my mum. And her mum then leased the house for 8 years. So that's the power of actually understanding each individual attribute, whether or not it be on portal, social, print, the conversation around what it is that you're doing, like being someone who's going to go out there and create competition because you're going to find a unique audience. And I think there were some stats that recently came out about unique audiences that Domain has and people that earn more income that tend to go to Domain and people in a position that ultimately they pay, where Domain was included in the schedule, that there was a clear increase in what that property sale actually happened. And this is a really important part if you're saying you've got to make a decision. And I just think it's not an option. You've got to have a belief about how you want to go and position your product. And I can't do my job if I don't have the buyers there to begin those negotiation skills.
Yeah. So just to come back to your question before is there's I guess the best way to partner with us is to come with the problem and an open mindset around the partnership. And I'll give you two examples, like a brand down in Victoria looking to crack into that $5+ million market, currently operating between $1 to $3 million, doing about 5,000 transactions a year, coming to us and saying, I want to crack into that premium luxury market. Can you help me get there? And that's where we start to access our unique audiences or the unique assets that we own to build a strategy for you over the next 12 months to build presence into those markets from a branding perspective, but to also earn the right to be able to operate in those kind of markets as well as you go. Another example is, and it doesn't necessarily need to be around product, but Belle and I, the number of times that they've said on a standalone office, and it might be like, hey, I'm having people problems, or can someone come and talk at our conference that's in PX inside of your business, so people experience HR as we call it. And the amount of value that a lot of agencies get from that, from just getting someone from Domain, from our people experience who's had a 20-year career just in that alone, there's a lot of different value adjacencies that we can bring just outside of selling your product.
So, Belinda, I'm going to ask you the question. Thoughts, what can most agencies do better, when it comes to how they position themselves in that digital environment and workflow?
I think the best thing people can do, especially if you're thinking about a sales agent wanting to elevate their career, wanting to be strong in their marketplace, is look around you. What are the best agents doing? What's the recipe for success in terms of what's the marketing schedules look like? What's the positioning and branding looks like? How are you hosting your open homes and using the digital tools to really set yourself apart so you can focus more time on relationship building? And I just hear all too often the excuse of I had to, cut all the corners because I wanted to not miss the listing. And I think there's such a powerful opportunity we know if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to get the same results. So really look at crafting out a plan of what your recipe for success looks like. What's a recipe for success for your marketing campaign look like? And make sure you stick to it with conviction and belief, because you're doing the right thing for the vendor. And if you have their best goals in mind, then you're going to deliver.
So Belinda, if someone was listening to today's podcast, needed to get in contact with Domain, how would they do it?
So we have a suite of 100+ account partners across the country, so you can connect with them. If you can't find the contact of them, please reach out to our support team or the Domain website. We've got a team waiting to support your business.
It's awesome. Well, Angus and Belinda, so great to have you on the Founders Podcast this year.
Thanks, Joshua.
Thanks, Josh.